The sax is arguably one of the most versatile instruments available, capable of playing in a multitude of different styles and with a multitude of different sounds. Now, compared to its woodwind and brass cousins, it has a relatively short history, but during this time it has evolved so much. Now, during this video today, I'm going to demonstrate all the various styles associated with the saxophone, so wish me luck. The year is 1846, and this is when Adolphe Sax invented the sax. Now, for the first few decades, the sax was primarily just used in the military and for classical compositions. And Adolphe didn't just invent one saxophone. He invented an entire range of saxophones, ranging from the very deep contrabass sax all the way through to the sopranino. And the keys of the instrument were spaced B-flat, E-flat, B-flat, all the way through to the top instrument. But he also invented saxophones in the keys of C and F, and these have now largely died out. But just crazy to think that this one guy invented this entire family of instruments during his lifetime. But he also had an association with the military, and he invented the sax, as I say, but he sold the instruments as well to the military. And I think it was that relationship that started up the association with the saxophone and the military, and that has been ever present since. But when we're talking about classical music in general, in modern terms, it really does span a multitude of different sort of subgenres. And in terms of the various settings of the saxophone within classical music, nowadays we could think of the likes of a concert band, solo compositions, solo repertoire, saxophone quartets, and even the saxophone makes an appearance in modern orchestral music. So now I'm going to put myself on the rack and demonstrate something that is, broadly speaking, in a classical style. So it's now the 1920s, and we really enter the heart of the matter, as far as I'm concerned, when it comes to the saxophone, which is the jazz era, and in particular, the big band swing era. Now, we think of Duke Ellington, we think of Count Basie and all those wonderful compositions, and the saxophone was so central to that particular sound. And then as we move on a little further, and in enters Charlie Parker, the maestro himself, and everything just speeds up twofold. Bebop is introduced to us, and the sound is explosive, it's driving, it's wild, it's so exciting. And the saxophone just takes on a whole new direction at this point. Now, moving away from the bebop sound, in the 1950s, we have the likes of Earl Bostic coming in and producing a big, fat, blazing R&B sound with a lot of growl to it and a lot of definition. We think of tunes like Flamingo and then Harlem Nocturne, quite contrasting from the bebop stuff that was coming before it. But if I'm just going to demonstrate some general jazz playing, because it's such a wide and broad spectrum of music, why not choose a rhythm changes in B-flat? So that's what I'm going to demo for you right now. let's talk about funk and fusion. It's my favorite genre. It's the 1960s and the 1970s, and we have bands like Weather Report with the incredible Wayne Shorter setting a new standard. And then one of my personal favorites, we've got Maceo Parker coming into his own with that particularly funky saxophone, alto saxophone style. And what's so incredible about this style is that the saxophone is so capable of producing such a funky and rhythmic style, which is one of the prerequisites of playing funk. It's all about the space between the notes. It's about the percussive start to the note. And the saxophone is wonderful at playing in this genre. It's also really important to mention the horn section, because really it was around this time when we had the likes of the Memphis Horns, who operated for Stax Records, and then the JBs, just mentioned Maceo Parker, he was one of the members, the JBs being the horn section of the James Brown Band, and then there were so many famous horn sections that followed afterwards. But it's such an iconic sound, and we could do a whole video on horn section, but that is for another day, just because the sound of the saxophone, particularly a tenor, locked in with a trumpet and a trombone is something special. And it all kicked off around this period in time. And then after that, we have the likes of Tara Power, those really famous punchy horn sections, all the way through to modern pop stuff, which I'll talk about in a second. But I have to spare a mention to the horn section. So there it is. It is rock and pop time. It's now the 1980s and the 1990s. And for many of you watching, this may be the most memorable and enjoyable era of all time, because the 1980s saxophone solo is a thing of beauty. And unfortunately, it just doesn't exist anymore now in the 2020s. We have the occasional saxophone solo, but they're just throwaway in the background things. But in the 1980s, it felt like almost 50% of the best songs that came out had incredible saxophone solos. And then the rock era as well, so many incredible saxophone moments. We think of the sax player in Tina Turner, we think of In Excess, we think of Bruce Springsteen, these famous, big, powerful, growly saxophone lines with so much character and passion in them. Love that stuff. So yeah, let's hear a little flavour of some rock and roll saxophone now. So as the saxophone kind of dwindles a little bit in terms of its use in pop music in the 1990s, it really takes over in strength in club music in the 1990s. So club, house, dance, that whole genre, particularly the alto sax, it just has this really nice flavor when we mix it with those club beats, particularly when you add a nice washy reverb to the sound. It sounds great. We think of tunes like Jubel, for example, really famous sax lick. So let's hear a little taster of this now. And now we're almost up to date. It's 2010 and we have the likes of the EDM, an experimental style of music coming in, which really fuses a mixture of sort of Afrobeat, funk, dance steps, all rolled into one. And the saxophone is right at the forefront of this particular style because it's played in such a way where it's very percussive, there's a lot of blues scales involved, the use of special effects to give it that extra pizzazz and exciting sound, and led by really colourful players like Leo Pellegrino, really famous for producing such wonderful sounds that captured the imagination of audiences worldwide. So I'm going to give it a go and try and play in the Leo P style. Wish me luck. Now, there's no way I can demonstrate every style associated with the sax, and what I've just given you there is a flavour, a broad brush approach to the key milestones of various styles associated with sax over the ages. For example, I didn't mention klezmer music, which sounds absolutely ridiculously technical and flamboyant, and I just don't have the skills to demonstrate that, but you should check it out separately because it is quite a wonderful thing. And then also smooth jazz. Let's spare a mention to good old Kenny G for being really probably the most famous saxophone player on the planet. But aside from all of that, let's think about the gear for a second, because you may have spotted I was using different setups, different saxophones, but crucially different mouthpieces throughout this video, because it's such a wide span of styles there, and we can't do this on just one mouthpiece. So some of them were extremely high baffled mouthpieces to give me that very projecting sound, and then others were just more straight cut, kind of plain sounding mouthpieces, and hopefully you could hear the severe contrast in sounds that you can produce on a saxophone in this one video. And as you can see, I'm surrounded by saxophones here, so quick pitch for the shop here. We have all of this gear which enables you to play in all of the different styles and produce all the different sounds that you heard from me today. So do get in touch if you're interested in particular styles and sounds that you heard demonstrated in this video. And finally, I leave you with the thought, is it not time we came up with a new genre? I mean, we're like 15 years on from the last one I mentioned, the experimental thing of the 2010s. We seem to be broadly getting new styles and genres coming in every 15 or 20 years or so. So perhaps it's over to you viewers to come up with the next big thing.